invite you to take a journey with us to a place where the lines between reality and the bizarre run together, and open a gateway to a world that looks and seems a lot like ours, only not as bright under the midday sun, and much more uncertain when the moon looms hazily above. Watch your step. Proceed with caution. Welcome to Nightshade.
Welcome once again to another episode of Nightshade. This is Casey Krause with Lake Avalon Entertainment with my better half, Heidi Lynn. Say hello to everyone, Heidi.
Hi, everyone.
Currently, Nightshade is our exclusive podcast series. It's an anthology of original short stories which delve into the realms of science fiction and suspense, fantasy, psychological thrillers, etc. Many of the tales are dreamed up by yours truly, but there are some really cool ideas being generated and spawned from other members of the Lake Avalon family. In addition, we welcome ideas from outside sources as well, so if any of you have any really cool ideas and you'd like to share them with us, just get in contact with us via email or through social media. We'd love to chat with you about it. Remember, each story is unique, and they're not necessarily connected, so you can start with any episode that captures your imagination. You can link with us through most forms of social media, and also find us right here at lakeavalonentertainment.com, where you can also find show notes, extras, information about our cast and crew, and our upcoming projects.
By the way, we have 2 other podcasts, one of which is A Very Deep Well, and we're putting that in hiatus till the beginning of next year. We're just kind of revamping and getting things, stored up so that we can put more out there. And another one that I'm excited about, I'm thrilled, I can't wait. I've had this one since I was in high school, and I just love to hear them come alive. It's called The Adventures of Nichols and Spud, and it's a space adventure, and it just sounds fabulous.
Yeah, I've actually recorded the first episode already, and I gave a voice to both characters, Nichols and Spud, and we have our friend Matt doing the voice of Ship, and I'm excited about it because it's kind of a throwback to Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon with the silliness of Invader Zim.
And I've listened to it already probably 1,000 times because it's so amazing.
But like Heidi said, we'll be bringing back A Very Deep Well and premiering The Adventures of Nichols and Spud, hopefully by the beginning of 2020. Now, to get you to episode 5 of Nightshade, which I call Double Shock, installment 1. That is to say, this is the first time we ever did kind of a double feature. It kind of reminded me of when I was a kid, and, mid-afternoon on Saturdays, they'd have this, double feature matinee on the old UHF channels, things like the Thriller Double Feature, just following Sir Graves Ghastly, which would be followed up later that night with The Ghoul, who broadcasted in both Detroit and out of Cleveland. Ron Swede unfortunately died here this last year, and it was definitely eye-opening with regards to my own mortality. Yep. Kind of a reminder that I'm not a spring chicken anymore. At any rate, the first short story that we feature in this episode is entitled Stranger at the Checkout. And of course, it's set at the checkout line of a supermarket. Well, I had been wanting to set something at a department store or superstore outlet for some time, but I was like, well, what's creepy about that, The Phantom of the X-Mart. Inflating prices at every corner. Well, then one day, my wife and I were grocery shopping, and we had the kids with us, and so we were, I think we were at one of the...
It was a self-checkout.
Yeah, and so we're running the groceries through, and I forget exactly how it played out.
Yeah, I don't totally remember either. I just know that somebody came up and handed us some monies and said, here, this will cover it, and disappeared. And it was weird. And we thought about it all the way home. We're like, what the heck? And
Right. But so, I was considering, the fact that I'm looking at like the headlines, the tabloids, and all of the strange things that occur there, and I'm sure that it was a case of paying it forward, but
yeah.
right. But I mean, like, I guess from my perspective, that doesn't happen that often. There aren't a lot of people out there that just go, here's a bunch of money, and we don't even know who you are, and so it just kind of. It was a wonderful thing that the guy did, but it weirded us out, and so I guess I got thinking about the fact that you got a giver, and what happens with those people that might give. The giver shortly thereafter comes to collect, and so and I was really creeped out by the whole thing. I was like, who is this guy? And, did my wife know him? And I of course, it was just, my pettiness and my insecurities talking. But, as soon as it was all said and done, I think we went over to get something to drink or something like that at one of the sandwich shops that was close by. And we were sitting there, and neither one of us had really talked about it. And then it just kind of came out. We started, kind of exploring what the heck just happened there. And, well, the story kind of, I unloaded it like right there. And all I had to do is, get home and put pen to paper. And it just came out like in, just like an hour or so. And so I penned it, and I said, I had entered several of my short stories into some of the flash fiction contests, specifically through my old alma mater, and I had never won. I came in like 4th place, and I got honorable mention and things of this sort, but I just never really penetrated as a winner. So I was in graduate school at the time, and I said, well, I'm going to go ahead and pen this one. I'm going to go ahead and enter it along with a few other short stories. And I waited forever, and I figured, well, it just kind of like, fell on deaf ears again, and I gave up on it. And then one day I got an email, and I opened it up and said, hey, you won 1st place. I don't usually win anything, but that was so cool. And I said, okay, well, obviously there's something to this story that resonates. So anyway, we took the story and broke it up into 2 separate perspectives. And I think it's really telling about how we never really know what's going on in other people's minds. But here, we give you a backstage pass to do just that in Stranger at the checkout.
We stood at the No Limit U-Scan, emptying out the remainder of our grocery funds from our pockets faster than the perishables could reach the end of the conveyor belt. I scanned the items with a heavy heart, knowing that each bleep meant 1 less quarter to give my children when they asked for something at the gumball machine on the way out. 1 less utility bill that was going to be paid on time, and oh God, it stabbed and stung me like 1,000 hornets. It had been a rough go lately. My husband had been let go from the college, and though he worked here and there, wherever he could earn a buck, it wasn't enough to meet the bills.
I directed the items she sent down to me, carefully categorizing and separating them into the appropriate bags. I know it sounds so OCD, it's just something I did. I mean, I had so little control over anything anymore. I don't know. I suppose I always did that, as long as I can remember. We have so little control over anything else, Not the weather, the climate, how others look at us. when and how we're gonna die. But with all the little things, computer files, underwear drawers, how food is put into a grocery bag, that we can control. And I did. I filed and categorized every aspect of our lives, and it drove her up a wall. We seem to be doing quite a bit of that lately, getting on each other's nerves. I didn't mean to drive a wedge between us, but it seemed I had a knack of pushing it ever wider. I knew she was upset and steadily growing weary. Not necessarily of me, at least I hoped, but definitely of the situation, of the merry-go-round that had become our lives. It never stopped and rarely slowed, and the places and people and things we passed over in the process seemed to seed in her that itch. The one that causes good families to fall apart and promising people to venture down dark paths that they otherwise would have steered clear of. And I blame myself. It wasn't that I wasn't trying, that I didn't make honest money, you see. Just that I didn't make enough. And God, I love being a family man, but feared that my role would eventually be shared or replaced by another. One who had better people skills, more talent, thicker hair, and some honest-to-God lady luck. Something that never fared kindly on yours truly.
I didn't want to spite Gene. He's a good man. The stress was getting to us both. I didn't want to hurt him. I love him. I just didn't know if I was in love with him anymore. I wanted more, and I think he knew it. If not, I was certainly throwing enough clues out there. I'd begun mentioning my colleagues' new cars and the latest doodads. I started pointing out fancy clothes and sparkly jewelry from the magazine ads. I was certain he knew.
She was running away, at least in her own mind. Of that, I was certain. It was more than frustration. It was discontent, and that worried the hell out of me. I mean, discontent leads to thoughts of what could be if only things were different. It was driving me crazy, and I swear a part of her seemed to be enjoying it. The thought of another man stepping in for me, of giving the kids and her what I couldn't, of being a real father, of eating the food that she prepared and had an annoyingly cute habit of taking a test bite from before serving it. Oh, of teaching my kids the way of life, of touching my wife. Oh. I never indicated that anything was bothering me, though. None of it. And she never, not once, since things started going south after the college let me go, alleviated my fears that these things were never acted upon. On the contrary, she made it quite clear that they were definitely being considered. And yet there we were. Each item that rolled down the belt carried with it a burdensome weight of our failing marriage. Still, we feigned a smile for the other's benefit, or perhaps for the kids, who knows? And maybe because under all that frustration, regardless of all the guilt and discontent, we still loved each other. At least I know I did her very much.
I continued to filter the goods over the scanner, each bleep edging the total closer to the $100 mark. I sighed, thinking, there goes a night at the show. I can forget that cute blouse I was looking at. Then it happened. That momentary loss of composure that tells everyone around you, look at me, I'm a freaking basket case. See, what happened was, I dropped my bundle of coupons, and a few of them flew under the pop cooler at the end of the checkout bin. I consequently threw the milk down that I had in my hand, and it burst open and flooded the floor at my feet. I followed it up with a dab nabbit, only I didn't censor myself this time. And I tucked my face into my palm, and I began to shed my anguish. And you know what? He refused me in that moment. That single gesture of chivalry. He didn't even jump to comfort me, as I wish he would. Damn it, Jean. A simple hug would suffice. Instead, he dug into his pocket and fished out a $20 bill he had left over from his tips. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you that he had taken a job waiting tables at a family diner. And he handed it over to my son.
Hey, buddy,
He said,
can you do a big boy favor for me? Go give this to Mommy. Our little Wyatt smiled and zipped over to his distraught mother.
Here, Mommy.
He exclaimed.
Daddy has some money. Don't cry. It's just milk.
I then searched for something to clean up the mess, and she took the bill from our son, subsequently grabbing hold of him and holding him tight. About that time, the baby joined in. And, of course, the weeping attracted gawkers. One of them, a large man dressed casual, but in an expensive shade of it, suddenly brushed past me, intrepidly grabbing hold of one of her hands and placing something in it, saying,
"Here, this should take care of it."
Jean glanced away. And when he got up the nerve to look back, the man was gone, but his shadow profoundly stained. I held the money in my hand for the better part of a minute and tenderly stroked it between my fingers before I decided to feed it into that cursed bleeping machine. Jean and my eyes met, but only for a second or two following that particular cash exchange. Much was said in the meeting of our eyes.
"So, who is he?
I never saw him before in my life.
Could you?
I give you my word on my mother's grave.
So you decided to make it official, huh?
Please stop!"
Right here in front of the kids, no less."
Then we filled the belly of the shopping cart, which our youngest was sitting, still crying, and we quietly wheeled it out of the store and towards the car. Once again, I began to weep, but this time it hurt even worse. I felt dirty, and yet I did nothing to warrant it. Jean held our oldest boy's hand and told him not to jump in the puddles.
But Daddy, it's fun.
Jean chuckled. But there was distress tucked under it.
I don't think either of us really knew who the stranger was who paid for our groceries that day. But each of us felt overwhelmed by his kindly gesture. We wondered what greater price was attached to it. I mean, it was one thing to pay it forward, sure. But there had been a string of similar gestures that had littered the headlines and become fodder for the tabloids as of late. And in each instance, the loner came to collect shortly thereafter, often in despicable and grotesque ways. I mean, who was he? Why did he do it? What did he really want? We drove home and said little, each pondering the concept of Good Samaritan, wondering if there truly could be such a thing anymore.
When I was a little girl, I had terrible, unrelenting nightmares. They kept my parents and me up all night, and we were at our wits' ends. Then one day out of the blue, we were out and about. In fact, I think we were, ironically, at a grocery store. And this man walked up to me and knelt down and gave me a rosary and a Bible and told me if I prayed to God and slept with these under my pillow, then the bad dreams would go away. And you know I did what he said, and by God, I suffered from nightmares no more. I can only hope that the man we just met was one and the same. But I feared he wasn't, and I know Jean feared him too. I couldn't help but think about the stories in the news. The single mother who had her mortgage paid for by a stranger, and less than 2 months later, a baby was taken from the home while the family slept. And the old couple who hadn't the money to cover the doctor bills. They were eating cat food. Someone allegedly paid off the debt, and a week later they were slain while taking a walk through the park. And of course, the young student who was going to have to quit school until a stranger covered the expense of her tuition. She disappeared for 6 months, then returned, pregnant, and all but a vegetable. She giggled and she said very little except for she was carrying the devil's baby. Stories like these were becoming abundant, and I just didn't know what to make of the stranger who helped us at the checkout.
And if he wasn't some stranger who meant well, was he the one who would tear our family asunder? We didn't sleep in the same bed that night. And neither of us did much in the way of sleeping. For every shadow that danced off the walls, and every light that shone through the windows, reminded us of him. And they waited and waited and waited, but he never came. Damn creepy strangers paying for your groceries. Now, like I said, I just, in real life, I didn't know what to really think of it. But it's really unnerving when you don't truly know what one's motives are, Which applies just about 100% of the time. I mean, my dog's looking at me right now and asking to go out or be fed, or so I think. But what's really going on behind those sad brown puppy dog eyes? Oh, I've seen clips from The Secret Life of Pets. I'm hip to what really goes on when we're not at home. Moving right along, the second story we'd like to present to you in this episode of Nightshade is something I've had around for quite some time. Now, see, I grew up listening to my mom and dad's music, and I've always been enamored by the 1950s and 60s. In fact, I'll go on the record, tell you right now, in my opinion, George Lucas only directed 2 great films. One, of course, is the original Star Wars, Episode 4, A New Hope. And the second is American Graffiti. Well, I actually have the entire collection, and Heidi got me some of these.
Well,
I have the entire collection of those Johnny Lightning cars based on the film hanging on the walls of my workroom. I also have a license plate. I have the poster too, but I have a license plate, the replica THX 138 that was on John Milner's car in the movie. And it was my goal to have it signed by the entire cast. But thus far, unfortunately, Cindy Williams is the only one to have autographed it. The only one to visit the Comic-Con circuit in our area. She was a sweetheart, though, but I'm still holding out hope for some of the others, Paul Lamette, Candy Clark, Charles Martin Smith, to make it to the Great Lakes State. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more. And I also absolutely love the Back to the Future trilogy. It's a veritable masterpiece, I might add. Well, you stir those 2 great films together and mix them with a pinch of Christine, and you have Dream Cruise. It's an experimental piece. Experimental in that I wanted to see the first scene come to life, how it would play out. Well, I waved my creative wand, and voila, presto, it became its own little short story. One that I'm certainly proud of, though it did and still does belong to a much bigger piece, which I hope to one day film. I don't know, I guess I always wanted to go back in time. Just like Marty McFly in Doc Brown's stylistic time machine. And regret is something I think we all suffer from, at least from time to time. That's essentially what I tap into in Dream Cruise. Now, for a lot of us, part of that regret comes in the form of ghosts. I got thinking about objects and how they so often witness or house our grief and heartache. And I said, hey, that's the ticket. It happened with Christine, so I took all these elements and whipped up a brew for my own time travel-like piece with a mystical car.
so, I guess the Kennedy limousine is haunted. Like, go figure. It's one of the most haunted things at the Henry Ford Museum, which is close to where we live. And you worked there for a while. Maybe you can tell us,
Yeah. So yeah, I was for a short time I was a historic presenter at the Henry Ford, which was a must see for anybody who visits.
Yeah, it was south end of Detroit. Yeah.
And so one of the very first things that they told me was that the museum was haunted, and that certain artifacts there house the ghosts of this person and that person. I know that the Henry Ford has the Lincoln chair and the...
I know I'd be creeped out if I saw... I'd walk by it and see Lincoln sitting in it. That would be crazy.
It has a lot of artifacts that are considered macabre. And, there's several artifacts there that were attached to very violent deaths.
Was that the Lincoln chair he got shot in?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, and the Kennedy limousine that JFK was assassinated in Dallas, November 22nd, 1963. Now, the limousine continued to be a presidential vehicle after the era of Kennedy. In fact, they had made some modifications on it, put I believe, a hard-top roof on it, and it was later retired, and eventually ended up calling the Henry Ford its home. So I walked past it, I don't know, numerous times. I never got a weird vibe about it. But allegedly, there are a lot of guests and I guess certain faculty who do get strange feelings and have seen in both photographs and by the naked eye objects and shapes that don't belong, including, but not limited to, a gray man or a guy in a gray suit or something like that.
Well, we've never been in the museum where it was just us with nobody else around. So even if there was something floating around there's so many people and busyness that we probably wouldn't notice it anyway.
Right. We mentioned it before, though, and it's a great place, and I draw a lot of inspiration from just simply walking through. But yeah.
My favorite's always been the dollhouses. They have one that's gigantic. I've never seen one so big in my life. It is most amazing. But I'm sad. I like toys.
Yeah, that would be a cool idea.
Incidentally, you were going to base this story on the Woodward Dream Cruise, right?
Yes.
The Woodward Dream Cruise is the largest one-day car get-together in the world, and it's right in our backyard. We go there sometimes, and it's really kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean, being in Michigan, we the teens back in the day, used to cruise up and down our main streets, and Woodward was one of them. We have the Gratiot cruise. I'm sure that because we have a lot of French named streets, so I'm sure that Shaner and Gratiot and Grospec, these are odd sounding names, and
it's always fun when people come here and they try to get directions and they say it fun.
Yeah, even in some instances we've had out of state GPS refer to the streets as Gratiot or Schoner, and those aren't not even close to the pronunciations, but
it's like that everywhere. Everyone who comes out of state to certain places. But anyway, this story has a lot to do with that, and classic cars especially are real huge around here. And it's exciting to see them drive up and down the street. You go to a McDonald's and you can find a classic car from a movie or a TV show sitting in the parking lot. It's that random. It's happened to me. It's happened to the people I work with. And the other day, the guy at work said that he came across the Batmobile and he showed us the original one from the 60s. And it's just awe-inspiring.
Yeah, we talked about the Henry Ford Museum and the fact that, it houses a ridiculous amount of classic vehicles throughout the history of automotive production. You and our youngest son just randomly, what was it, last year, ran into the Roscoe car, wasn't it?
Yeah, from the Dukes of Hazzard, yes. The guy who owns, I believe there's two cars that they use. He owns one of them, and they park it at McDonald's
by my house, and I see it every once in a while. And one time we actually asked him if we could get, inside, and I have a picture of my youngest son sitting and driving the Roscoe car. He's so cute. He's 8, and he was all excited, and because my kids know what all these old TV shows are, because we're retro nuts.
Yeah, and he, like, you took a picture of the trunk, and he's got it,
Yeah, he's got memorabilia from the entire show. The signatures, he actually has signatures on the top of the trunk and inside on the underneath of the trunk, because the ones on the top on the outside are pretty faded because of the weather.
I imagine, in the sun. But yeah, that's it's really cool, and yeah, so I was, in fact, if I end up penning Dream Cruise as a larger piece, without question, one of the
focal points.
One of the focal points of the story will be a cruise, like the Woodward Dream Cruise or the Gratiot Cruise. Absolutely. But anyway, incidentally, we have some new voices in this one. Wendy Renee, who we are officially introducing, narrates the tale. Now, from the very beginning, I had envisioned a feminine quality to the narration. But we did something a little different this time around and told it third person. See, unlike the first person perspectives that have been predominant in our tales, I guess I don't know, I wanted to stray away from the character Dale telling the story because he monologues in it, and I thought it would be an overkill. So, plus I wanted the voice to be, kind of omnipresent or even allude to the feminine quality of the car itself. So, we'll see how it goes. I like it. We also brought Jeff Priscorn on board for this one. I've had the privilege to work with Jeff on a few other projects, film projects, in the past, as well as his very talented wife. Great people, phenomenal talent. Well, with that said, I actually found myself in a really tough spot as the creative driving force behind Dream Cruise. See, I, to some extent, can now identify with Robert Zemeckis. That is to say, the Back to the Future films may have been quite different if Michael J. Fox wouldn't have freed up his schedule and contract restraints. In fact, because he was initially prevented from signing on to the project, Zemeckis went with his second choice, Eric Stoltz. Now, Zemeckis said that Stoltz, who was awesome in Some Kind of Wonderful, by the way, one of my favorite John Hughes productions, it was said he had given an admirable performance. But 4 weeks or so into production, Stoltz was canned. And Michael J. Fox ended up being brought on to play the lead role after all. Well, I had our friend and long-term colleague Matt Grammatico slotted to play the role of Dale. And, well, he recorded the entire lot of dialogue for me, but he was not at all comfortable with the role. And I could tell. And but he told me that it just wasn't coming out the way he had heard it in his head. So I mulled it over for a while, and eventually I decided that I wanted to contact Jeff about playing the role. Of course, Jeff nailed it, but I ended up having to let Matt know that he was out. Of course, he's still working with Lake Avalon, and we're still friends, but sometimes I think everyone involved knows when something's just not working. Anyway, I couldn't help but draw the comparison between Jeff, Matt, and myself to Robert Zemeckis, Eric Stoltz, and Michael J. Fox. With that said, I began to draft a role for an upcoming Nightshade episode, for which I think Matt would be perfect, about a stranger midnight caller. At any rate, for anyone who's ever been in a very dark place, emotionally, mentally, you'll identify with this tale. So buckle up. We're going for a small joyride in Dream Cruise.
Dale sat in his '59 Chevy Impala. Old music blared from her tweeters. She was completely restored from her new cherry red coat to a chrome decor. She still sported her original interior, but he rebuilt the big block himself. All 8 cylinders of it. She wasn't his first. He owned one just like her when he was a mere lad, but it didn't mean this one meant any less to him. If anything, she meant more, because he saved her from a rusty grave, like Frankenstein, piecing her back together from the remnants of other lost Detroit chariots, born during the days when it meant something to own an honest-to-goodness product, brandishing the Made in America stamp. They were parked in his attached garage, somewhere amid the twisted maze of the subdivision he called home. Brenda, his wife, wasn't with him, however. He surprised her and one of the neighbor gals to a girl's day out, even though it was going to cost him a possible shutdown of a major utility. It didn't matter, though. He had planned ahead, leaving his last will and testament out on the kitchen table with a note for Brenda's eyes only, explaining everything. Dale was a diabetic, you see, and he had deliberately forgotten to take his insulin, and he planned to make it look like he tuned up the Impala and was testing it out when he conveniently went into diabetic shock, passed out with the old girl running, and slipped quietly into oblivion. It should work, and the insurance along with the sale of the car should be enough for Brenda to move on. It would work. It had to. And Dale didn't mind too much. At least he would go out sitting behind the wheel of his second great love. The door was closed on the garage. Dale and his sexy girl in red sat, basking in the flickering glow of the faulty fluorescent rod hanging from the rafters and the splash of red generated from the neon sign which hung from a bent nail and drew out the word brewski sequentially every 35 seconds or so. He had her purring and wanted to take her for one last cruise, yearning for the days long ago when things seemed so much brighter. A fog swirled up from the back of their dusky den and steadily became denser. Dale found it difficult to breathe. His secret burdens were becoming too much. He wanted to turn back the clock. He wished it was 1959 again, and that he was still in high school, and that his future was not yet determined, that he could drive his lady in red to wherever the road stretched, to wherever his dreams would lead them.
How'd I get here? A question I've asked myself too many times to count. But this time I am truly at a loss. Why'd I let it all get away from me? How'd I let it all get away from me? God, how I wish there was such a thing as second chances. Not just old people awkwardly trying to force a second childhood. There's so many things I'd have done differently, starting with... Well, I sure as hell wouldn't have ended up here, that's for sure.
Overwhelmed with regret, he wondered if his final joyride would get him to a place where there are no worries, where no bill collectors could find him, where he could be free and eternally naive. Like when he was 17 and donned a varsity jacket and thought that driving to Kansas was like going to another country. Could heaven be like that? A secret pocket in the universe where the places and people and things you loved when you were young would all be there waiting for you. Forever. And would heaven even have him at this point?
Damn white collars. I'm a good man, an American. I worked my whole life for my family and country, and they just rip it away like none of it mattered.
Come off it, Dale. They didn't do this to you. You did.
Who said that? Oh, man. Won't be long now, boy. You're starting to hallucinate.
Dale had been nearing retirement since some 10 years ago, but when things became a bit tumultuous around the plant, he thought he'd try his luck with a few hands of blackjack at the casinos downtown. And at first he did pretty good, managing to make an extra $1,000 one lucky afternoon. He figured he had the magic touch. But like his late schoolmate, Jack recognized, Lady Luck can be a fickle sort. The two chums were unstoppable on the gridiron in their heyday, but Jack wasn't as lucky on the green lands over in Southeast Asia, and was alas bit by a metal pest that gave him a fever, which got the best of him. He died holding the hand of a pretty nurse in a medical evac tent, pretending that it was his high school sweetheart Diane. And for a moment, just a moment mind you, Dale could nearly see him as plain as the numbers on the radio dial. He was sitting in the back seat, just like in the good old days. Grinning at Dan in the rearview mirror, Dale muttered,
"Go away, you pesky ghost."
He loved Jack and still missed him something awful, but it seemed as of late, his mind was showing him things that he didn't really want to see. He chalked it up to stress. It was said that we adjust to tragedy over time, that the pain tends to subside, but one thing that doesn't go away is our memory. And Dale always thought Jack was dealt the unlucky hand, until two guys in white shirts and ties came over and interrupted his daily toil just a few weeks earlier. One patted him on the back. The other handed him a piece of paper.
Just wanted to let you know.
Dale attempted to present a defense for himself over the roar of the machines. The men just shrugged, offering their hands for a shake. Dale entertained their gesture, even though the etiquette pained him. Then they left him alone in the shadow of his machine. He stood there, flaccid, clad in denim, rubbing the sting of being terminated after a lifetime of loyal service. He felt like a flawed product, realizing he was less important to the company than one of the machines he operated. He was just another cog, another lever, and they were a dime a dozen. He worked the remainder of his shift, all 10 minutes of it, and then limped out of the complex and into the parking lot for the last time.
Boy, I miss Jack. Best mechanic I ever knew. We should have gone all the way to NASCAR together, my friend. Damn war.
But the worst part was that Dale exhausted most of his retirement plan to feed the slot machines that he hoped would replenish the thousands he lost to the blackjack dealers. Seems he didn't have the magic touch after all, and he hadn't told his wife any of it. She married Dale straight out of high school. She loved him, but with her kids all raised and the house empty, so quiet it was maddening, she felt forgotten. In fact, even her art offered her little comfort anymore. Dale knew she was unhappy. She wouldn't be able to take those college courses she had her heart set on. He was afraid she was thinking of leaving him.
Why'd I mess things up so bad? Why don't I just tell her? Maybe we can work together and get through it. You love her, you idiot. What have you done? Oh, Brenda, forgive me, baby. I'm just an old fool.
If only the white shirts would have given him another year, he thought, maybe two.
Too old to work.
That's essentially what mandatory retirement means. He never felt so useless, so empty. And he wondered if Brenda would understand. He hoped she would. She was all he had left. No, it was more than that. She was all he really ever had. But he had taken her for granted. Complacency will do that. In high school, he went out of his way to get her to notice him. And for the last couple years, he went even further to make sure she didn't. Anyway, it would all soon be over. He sat there in his Impala, breathing in the toxic atmosphere. He wanted to cry, but couldn't muster the tears.
Men don't cry, you idiot. I wish it had been me to have been taken by the war and not you, Jack. Brenda, baby. I hope you can rebuild. God knows I've tried. Oh, I just wish that I would have enlisted after Jack got drafted and not raced that idiot Mitch. Messed everything up, didn't it? After the accident, I couldn't even hobble into an end zone, let alone fight a war in some jungle 7,000 miles away.
Come on, Dale. You really want to end up like this? I mean, look at me.
Jack?
This time, Jack was there. And he was a ghastly sight. Like fresh roadkill, capturing the horror in the animal's face just after it got clipped by a set of speeding tires, and it realized that it didn't make it to the other side of the road.
Jack, is that you?
In the flesh, so to speak.
You look terrible.
Yeah, well, try wearing it. I'm telling you, pal. You know what I got? It hurts to be dead.
God, it's been so long. But, I never stopped thinking about you. Not one day went by that I wasn't overwhelmed by guilt. God, I wish I would have been there with you, pal.
Oh, that's brilliant. What about Brenda, huh? What about the kids? Does it look like things worked out very well for me? Jeez, Dale. You never did know how to be your own man.
Why are you being so hostile? We're supposed to be friends.
And you're supposed to be a husband. Remember what we talked about just before I shipped off? Huh? You and Brenda forever? A little ceremony by the lake? Diane and I as your maid of honor and best man. Well, don't I have a right to say something when my buddy's being a whiny little wimp?
Jack, all I'm saying is that I should have been there with you. Maybe you'd still be alive today. Maybe you would have put me straight when I lost my first 1,000 at the tables.
Maybe I shoulda. Maybe I coulda. Look, life's got no guarantees. Sometimes things work out for the best. Sometimes they don't. I hate to break it to you, Dale, but there is no happily ever after.
I screwed up, Jack. I screwed up big time. God, I'd have followed you anywhere. You know that? You were destined for greatness. I thought we were going to stay together. I thought we'd be Big Ten heroes and then write our own ticket wherever we wanted to go. Then you went and died on me, you son of a bitch.
Uh-huh. And you know what? You had a chance to live for the both of us. But you decided to throw in the towel when things got a little tough.
What was I supposed to do with a bum leg after the accident?
Gee, I don't know. Maybe you could have tried coaching, huh? Maybe you could have invested yourself into being an attentive husband and father instead of dwelling on the past. Maybe you could have went into business for yourself instead of being a lackey your whole life, huh?
You don't understand.
No? Have you gotten a good look at me? Let me tell you something, pal. Being dead sucks. But it does have one perk. It gives me plenty of time to think. And I've considered your situation, Dale. Oh, yeah. Long and hard. And you know what I've come up with?
I'm almost afraid to ask. What?
You, my friend, are pathetic.
Jack, I love you. You know that. But I've had just about enough of this.
Really? You're the one who wanted to be like me, remember? And here you have a life and a beautiful wife. And you want to rot in the ground like me? Hey, I'd trade places in a heartbeat, pal. If I had a heart that actually beat, that is.
You better keep your grubby hands to yourself, buddy. Friend or no friend, Brenda's my girl. Always been my girl. Remember that. You just mind your own business. Be concerned with Diane. You broke her heart. Who are you to take the high ground? I'm sorry, Jack. I didn't mean to take it that far. You're right. I'm taking the coward's way out, aren't I? Not something you did. Hey, Jack. Jack?
Dale glanced once again through the rearview mirror. Jack was gone. But then again, was he ever there? It was hard to tell, Dale thought. And so he let it out. Finally, let it out. It wasn't a long cry, but it was deep and painful. And when it was over, he felt drained. But he also felt free. Then he saw the for sale sign on the windshield. Chuckling, he figured nobody would want to buy an old car furnished with a dead guy. So he reached his arm over, grabbed the sign, and flung it into the waste bucket under the brewski sign. He pumped the accelerator. Boy, she sounded good. He gunned her and let her roar, giggling himself into hysterics under the den. Then, choking on the deliberation, Dale muttered,
Hell.
Put the old girl in drive and smashed her straight through the garage door. He wasn't sure what would happen when his wife got home, but he wanted to take her out for a drive along the shoreline, just like he did when they were young. There was a lot to talk about. They needed to have time together. Nothing else really mattered.
Yeah, so see, if more of us got haunted by our dead bros, the world would be a much happier place. Yeah, it's the Scrooge effect, you know? Ebenezer, dude, you're acting like a Now be a stand-up guy and pull your together. And the people acting like freaking assholes would either straighten up or die of a heart attack right then and there from fright, thus ridding the world of one last asshole, and thereby making the world a happier, brighter place.
Before we wrap things up, I'd like to give a shout out to Jerry and Tracy Polly with Hillbilly Horror Stories. They were great. We went to their show this weekend in Indiana and we had a freaking blast. Along with Nick and Rob with Brohio and Justin Remmel with Mysterious Circumstances. They were all fantastic. By the way, Jerry and Tracy will be in Atchison, Kansas, August 10th, and they got a few tickets left. It's a great show and it's so worth going. So thanks everyone for giving us a listen, and go on to iTunes or your podcast of choice and give us a listen and a rating, a good rating. We like good ratings. All right. We love you guys and we thank you, and we will talk to you soon.
Anyway, we hope you enjoyed these stories. We certainly like bringing them to you. Nightshade Episode 5, Double Shock, featured the stories Stranger at the Checkout, voiced by Heidi Lynn and myself, and our youngest son, Connor. And Dream Cruise, voiced by Jeff Prescorn as Dale, Wendy Renee as the narrator, and I, of course, voiced the voice of his dead friend Jack. This has been a Lake Avalon production, copyright 2019. And remember to visit LakeAvalonEntertainment.com for more information on our cast and crew, as well as some fun extra content. Be sure to explore all of Lake Avalon while you're there. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Nightshade on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. Leave us a like, a comment, or a review to help us reach even more podcast lovers like yourself. If you can't find us in your favorite place for podcasts, email Casey Krause at LakeAvalonEntertainment.com. That's KACEEKRAUSE at LakeAvalonEntertainment.com. Or interact with us on social media and let us know. Until next time, be sure to check out all of Nightshade's other stories. And don't ever find yourself locked in a room alone with a dog that doesn't blink.
We now close this chapter of Nightshade and return you safely to your daily motions, your toils, your fancies, your grinding routines. But remember, you're always but one mere step away from taking a path that isn't so familiar. So be ever vigilant, or you may find yourself not just a guest, but a permanent resident of our murky world of shadow and haze. Until next time, we wish you Godspeed, but hope that your life is far from normal.